Faster than a speeding bullet.
I ran until my muscles burned and my veins pumped battery acid.
More powerful than a locomotive.
An idea is like a virus. Resilient. Highly contagious.
Able to leap tall buildings in a single bound.
What's up, guys? Jared Moon here from Into 3 Fitness, and welcome to the Better Humanology podcast. Now, today we have Brian Mackenzie. Most of you know who he is from Power, Speed, and Endurance, formerly CrossFit Endurance. Very interesting dude. I've actually interviewed him once before. If you want to scroll back to episode 016, I have a short, like 20-ish minute episode that you can listen to. And I think it'd be a good idea, to be honest, to contrast everything Brian's been up to over the last several years, because what we talked about then and what we talk about now drastically different, but nonetheless very, very informational. So he just wrote a new book called Unplugged. We cover a lot of that today, and we talk about why he wrote it and a lot of the intricacies in being an unplugged athlete. So check that out. But another thing I know a lot of you are interested in, especially after that last podcast with Scott Carney, where we talked a lot about Wim Hof breathing and things of that nature. Well, Brian Mackenzie happens to be an expert on all of that stuff. So you can also listen to this episode if you're interested in learning more about breathing and breath techniques. So without any further ado, here is Brian Mackenzie for the second time. All right, Brian, I'm super pumped to have you back on the show, man. Welcome back to the Better Humanology podcast.
Thanks for having me, Jarrett. Appreciate it.
Yeah, man. So we are going to get started with some challenges. Make sure that everyone gets the blood going, gets the mind going for their week. So could you throw down a fitness challenge for all the listeners today?
Yeah, certainly. Attempt to do things with purpose and not to do things just to do them. I think we get caught up in including elite athletes. It's very easy to differentiate people who, and I don't mean this for general population, but as a competitive athlete, you know who the people are who want to win versus the people who are just doing it to train.
Right.
And unfortunately, our lives have gotten caught up in training as a mode of that is how movement and life is. And unfortunately, that's not necessarily the truth, because nature doesn't play by those rules. And so even training, which is something I participate in relatively every single day, is a hack. And this will kind of get more into the book, but attempt to understand more of what it is, or learn from what it is you're actually training to do in that particular training aspect. So, for instance, if I'm going to go lift heavy weights, are you just lifting heavy weights to get stronger, or what are you trying to understand and learn about that process through lifting heavy weights, like squatting heavy? Am I actually trying to improve what it is I do every day by getting up and down? Do I understand the mechanics of that? Do I understand the breathing, that's happening as a result of that? Do I understand my, position? What type of a squat, and why am I doing a front squat versus a back squat versus a high bar squat, whatever. Attempt to learn about the aspects of your everyday thing. And I think that's the biggest thing that's changed my life, is I don't wake up necessarily going, oh, I'm going to do this or that. Although I do follow a program, which is the PSE tactical program, but it's built in a way for me that I'm learning how I can manipulate it and play with it in certain ways. And one of those ways, for instance, was yesterday we had a 400-meter sled drag, and I live off of a dirt road. So that creates a much different variable than being on concrete when pulling a sled or, dragging a sled. And I chose to drag it with one arm versus using two arms and dragging it. And it was something Kelly Starrett threw at me. And this is something we always do. And so it became a considerably much different learning experience than just dragging. And I found out so much more about how connected I am. So there's another example of something, So learn from what it is you're doing and how that applies to what it is you're doing in your life.
Okay, perfect, man. I love that. And how about a mental toughness challenge for everybody? And this could really be anything, anything that you think is going to push somebody mentally.
I would say from a mental standpoint, understanding why you're doing what you're doing. Take 5 minutes every day. Like I use a breath practice every day. And that actually sets me up for my creative process, what it is I want to do, how it is I want to do it, and what motivates me to do what I'm doing, and keep me more in that playing mindset of what I'm doing. So I think to really challenge oneself is to connect the dots between what happens since we put up a fitness challenge with what happens while you train or while you're setting up your day to be active, correlating that with your daily life and how that occurs. Like, hey, do I melt down and come apart when I'm training and when things don't go the way that I want them to? Or how do I react to these things? And how does that connect to my daily life?
Perfect. I love that. I love challenging athletes to do that, get a bigger, because I feel like if someone quits a program too early or if they're not sticking with it, I really feel like they haven't answered that question well enough. They haven't seen how it fits into their daily life or the big why behind what they're doing. I feel like if they truly did what you just said, sat down and thought about it and connected those dots, training would just be a daily practice. You wouldn't give up on a program when you start one.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, man, how about a book recommendation?
It's a 2-part series, Sapiens and Homo Deus, by a guy by the name of Yuval Harari. And it's a 2-part series. Sapiens comes first, and it's a brief history of mankind and how we've basically trudged our path on this planet from day one till about now. And then the Homo Deus basically means man god, where we're headed. And I think one of the most important messages I've ever received in trying to understand myself, and even with the first 2 questions, is the only predictor of history is behavior. There is no other predictor. And we can't predict the future for shit. We've never been able to do that. We've attempted. There's been times where, yes, we've connected certain things and said certain things, but the only thing that has come to fruition has been our behavior and our treatment of each other and other species.
And so is our current behavior is the predictor of things to come, is what you're saying?
You got it.
Okay.
So, for instance, we just figured out how to hack human DNA. This is brand new.
Wow.
We now can make human embryos genetically perfect, per se.
Oh man.
Oh yeah. Here we go.
Here it is.
So you're in my lifetime. This isn't going to be really. It may catch us on the tail end. That said, and I could be way off predicting that one.
Yeah.
But how have we treated other races? Let's look at slavery. How have we treated other species? Let's look at animals. Like, how have we treated these things as time has gone on? And although we believe we've eradicated things like slavery and all of these things, we still have classes of human beings. We still have upper class, middle class. We all talk about it: upper class, middle class, lower class versus A class. Like, we're all human. You can bet that when the superhumans come around, will they have been able to change the behavior of the superhuman and how they look at the rest of us mere Homo sapiens?
Yeah, the imperfect.
Yes.
Yeah, that's an interesting train of thought there, because that's so true. And then likewise, if they are the gross minority in coming on, then I'm sure that the imperfect population is not going to like the perfect one.
Oh.
So
and we're in a day and age where there's so many people, like there's so many human beings, that you have things like, regardless of your religious preference or not, religion created this thing that happened, that turned into control. Science has followed that exact suit, where science only goes, basically the majority of science looks for power. That's all it's doing. So you have things like, take veganism, for instance, and there's nothing wrong with being a vegan, but vegans believe that they are here to change the planet, and they are the cultivators of how this planet should evolve, and they're planetary evangelists, and they're going to tell everybody how to eat and live. But there's also the paleoers, and we have the paleo people who believe they have the answer, and you should eat the way they eat, and caveman, and and it's like everybody's got this opinion and trying to tell everybody what to do, and if you're not following what they're doing, well, and is that any different than how religion behaved back in medieval times, or
Right.
even a century ago, or even some religions today? And it isn't. It's the exact same thing.
And that's what I always joke about. Like, that's the new thing not to discuss at the dinner table. It used to be like sex, politics, and religion. Like, don't bring that up. A little too awkward. And now it's your, if you have a food preference or choice, whether that's paleo, veganism, like, don't bring it up, because it's going to turn to an argument with someone if they have their preference as well that's opposite of yours.
Correct.
That's crazy, man. All right, so thank you so much for all the challenges and the book recommendations. I love that. I'm going to check those out. Now, I want you to give a quick intro. I'm sure a lot of people listening already know who you are, but I had you on the show before. But man, I think you've done so many new things. It's been over 2 years, I think, since you were originally on the show. And I mean, you have XPT Life. You wrote a new book, which is a big reason I wanted to have you on. Unplugged, all sorts of stuff. So can you kind of catch us up what you've been up to the last 2 years or so?
I think the biggest change of everything that I've done is I've moved really away from a lot of the strength and conditioning, or even endurance type stuff. I still am engaged in it, and I still connect the dots between what it is I'm doing. But most of my work at this point is geared towards understanding breathing and breath work and how it alters state. And I've been fortunate to get involved in a number of projects, one of which I can't really mention, but another, it's like I'm involved in a research project out of Stanford Medicine that's based around fear and anxiety, and it's interesting that I got involved in that, because what happened is I've been going after performance geared towards breath work, and trying to understand that a lot better, or learn from it a lot more. And I think that's the big thing with why things have changed, and why people feel like things have changed with me so much, is I'm just constantly evolving and trying to learn and understand as much as I can. And then once I have a little bit of a grasp on things, and I feel like I've got solid information to put out, I just start sharing that information. So the interesting thing that's happened is that we found, through our understanding of breath work and the respiratory system, which is arguably the least trained system we've looked at in human performance, yet it's arguably the most important, because although our brain and the mind becomes a very important aspect of what it is we're looking at, and neurologists, et cetera, would highly disagree with me, but the fact is oxygen is the most important source of life that we have. And to put that in terms of importance, I brought up veganism, paleo, whatever, low carb, high carb nutrition. That is a multi-billion-dollar industry. And people believe, or under the impression, and I'm not denying this, that changing your nutrition is going to save your life. Right?
Right.
And it can change your life. And for a lot of us, it has. It's changed my life. And if we were to look at nutrition, how long can we go without food? Roughly 30 days.
Yeah.
IBM actually, this is kind of a morbid thought or thing, but IBM was the first company to construct an algorithm to figure out for the Nazis back in Nazi Germany how to kill a human being by working them to death, and how little you could feed them on calories.
Wow.
So Yeah, it's pretty shocking. There's actually a book out on that. I can't remember the name of it, but IBM never answered questions on things. And the fact is that's how they were first funded. It's interesting because we look at food is the very important thing. And although it is, you can last roughly 30 days without food. There's a guy from Scotland who went 382 days without food, just on a water fast only.
Wow, I had no idea that kind of length of time was possible.
Yeah, when you are morbidly obese, or not morbidly, I don't think he was just obese. He was 400 something pounds. He came down to 180, and he had almost perfect blood panel.
Wow.
Yeah, shocking. And yet we've got everybody screaming at us what we need to eat, how we need to eat. This is where the healthiest, and it's like, okay. And so where am I going with this? Well, how long can you last with hydration without dying?
Couple days.
4 probably tops.
Yeah.
4 or 5, right?
Yeah.
Yet how long can you last without oxygen?
Depending on the person, a few minutes.
Roughly 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Depending on the person.
That's a really good point, man. Yeah. I don't think I ever looked at it that way.
We've got diseases connected to literally almost all disease is connected in some way to our inability to process oxygen properly.
That's incredible. And so how did you stumble on all of this? How did this come about?
The interesting thing is it was this thing called a training mask.
Yeah.
And that was like 4 or 5 years ago. Actually, I think it was like 5. Yeah.
I have one sitting in my garage. Yeah.
So that's kind of one of my signs of like, oh, I need to go learn. It is when I have an opinion on something I've never really participated in or experienced, right? And I don't care how much you read. Reading is an experience. Reading is just accumulating information based off somebody else's opinion or research, and that does not garnish an experience on something. And so my experience had not been that. And so I made fun of something that I had not tried, and I put the mask on. And I instantaneously changed position. I instantaneously felt a diaphragm that I hadn't really felt before. And so I went into like a plank and I started doing some push-ups and I started doing some stuff. And I was like, holy crap, motor control just changed. And I fatigued out pretty quickly, but I made some pretty interesting changes. And one of the key things was that it forced me to actually use my nose more. And that I didn't pick up on that for a couple of years. And then, that obviously led into a lot of other things and trying to understand mechanics and breath work. And I met this guy, Wim Hof, and I went through his program years ago. And they had just launched an English version of it. And I'd reached out with my buddy Laird Hamilton to him, and he ended up coming out, and we ended up spending some time with him. And I spent some rather interesting time with Wim and got pretty immersed in his methodology and saw the places where I could fit in and help with what they were doing and what we were doing. And from a performance perspective, it just fit. And then, I just kept going and found I just had rabbit holes open up everywhere. I have experience in yoga. And so a lot of things started making sense back when I used to do yoga a lot. And so it just really expanded, and I was like, holy crap, we've just been looking at this incorrectly. Like we've been really everybody's been kind of turned off. Well, not everybody, a certain group of people are turned off by things by either because it's a training mask or it's yoga and it's this hippy dippy thing. You don't want to be some madman, hyperventilating and trying to get high and, it doesn't matter. But the fact is I felt like there's just this missing piece with everything. So that's where we went.
Yeah. And I feel like it took a while, but I feel like it has gained a lot of traction with athletes and everyone in between. I've heard a lot of people experimenting with the Wim Hof method. I just had Aaron Hind from Fit Aid on the podcast not long ago. He's talking about how he's been doing he took your course actually, and he's been doing the Wim Hof method or your breathing practice for several years, changed his life. What do you think the big factor here is that makes such a big difference, getting more connected to your breath? How can that help your performance, and how can that help, I don't know, your life?
I got a friend of mine, Casper Vandermeulen, who's from Amsterdam as well. He works with Wim. He's their lead instructor, and he does the science on everything for him as well. He's a phenomenal. He's a genius, and I'm stealing this from him. But breathing is a remote control to the brain.
Okay.
So once you understand that, meaning you've experienced that, you now know the importance of it. And so you find a place for it in your life and understanding it. A lot of people think, and trust me, I mean, I get as much kickback on that. Well, not as much kickback, because people are I think are very tiptoey, because I can shoot things down really quickly, especially with the internet trolls who seem to, not really want to participate in anything outside of what it is they understand. But the fact is, people, like I've had people be like, I breathe every day, dude. I don't need to think about it. And, it's interesting because most people from the Buteyko side of things, which is a Russian system, which was implemented into Russian medicine, it was the first line of defense against asthma. They've found 80% of the population is basically chronically hyperventilating, meaning you have a respiration rate of over 20 breaths a minute. And you're more than welcome to go look on the internet and find out what hyperventilation does to your brain. Chronic hyperventilation, take that over a long period of time. You basically deplete your brain of oxygen. And so if you're depleting your brain of oxygen, you're actually putting yourself into a constant sympathetic state. And what does a constant sympathetic state bring on? Well, if we were to take a look at just anxiety itself, or anxiousness, that will dovetail into just about most mental diseases that we see today, including depression. And when we see these problems, we then see a breath pattern that's really connected to it. And breathing is more or less the respondent of what's happening physiologically. So if I'm angry all the time, if I'm reactive all the time, and I'm only speaking from experience, we tend to have a breath pattern that follows that. And that pattern that follows it tends to be high and mouth breathing.
That's pretty crazy to think about. I'd never heard kind of the research side of it before. I've done a lot of breathing practices. I started with, my first experience was at SEALFIT. We did some basic, what he was calling box breathing. Yeah. And then at the end of the entire experience, I can't remember the name of it. It was this full on, it took like an hour to do, like lots of breathing. He brought in like a special guy for it. That was a pretty wild experience. What was that?
Holotropic?
Yeah. I think that was it. That was quite an experience. That was awesome. And I definitely do that again. But I've just looked at it from a lot of like managing stress on my end, helping with that kind of stuff. But I never thought of it so connected to a health perspective, what you're talking about of starving the brain of oxygen over long periods of time and basically ruining your health. That's pretty powerful right there.
Oh yeah. Heart disease.
And,
connected.
And what would you recommend someone listening to this who has no sort of breath practice? Where do you think that they should start to get involved or get started with it?
The simplest way is to just sign up for the PSE Breathe, which is an online program that we have. It's a daily ritual. Daily ritual. It's a daily practice. You could make it a ritual if you want. But there's several breath work routines that we do, from whether you're starting your day pre-training, ending your day stress, or even pre-workout or post-workout. And it just gives you an idea, and you don't need to follow all of it. And it's a fairly cheap option. And it gives you a basis for understanding. We're about to launch our fundamentals program for that. And we have what is called the Art of Breath program seminar that we do, which we travel for. Parts of that will be online here very shortly as well.
Okay, I'm really looking forward to that. I've been keeping an eye on your seminar schedule to see if you're getting closer to Texas, but I haven't seen it pop up
next year.
Next year? All right.
Next year we're going to Texas. Looks like we're going to go to the Houston area.
Okay. I'll come down. Even I was going to say, even if you didn't make it to Texas, I was just going to fly out to one of the ones you're doing. I definitely want to take the course. I've heard a lot of great things about it and would love to experience it. All right, man. So I do want to transition now to talk about your book, Unplugged. I haven't gotten all the way through it yet, but I've read a huge chunk of it, and I'll probably finish it up this week in all honesty. But what kind of kicked this book off? Maybe you can give like a short synopsis of the book for anyone who's unaware of it, and what kind of spurred the writing the book.
My work with Dr. Andy Galpin has really grown over the last number of years, and we first met after I did a Barbell Shrug podcast where he first heard me. But he had seen stuff I had done, and he didn't really like me because he didn't know me. But then he's heard me do the podcast, and he was like, "Oh, he's making sense." And so we actually connected. And I used to live in Southern California, and he is in Southern California, and so we ended up connecting and figuring out a lot of things together. Because what I do, and even take this to the breath work, is I use a lot of technology to kind of understand what's going on physiologically. But in that, I'm using to connect back to what's going on with me internally. What do I feel? And I learned very early on in my career that being dependent on technology led to a lot of problems, and not necessarily really learning from what it is we were doing. And I had a client, and I talked about this in the book, that, we were on a run, and we were running around, we were doing this 10-mile run, and he was freaking out because his heart rate was like 2 beats below where his popping point was. And he kept looking at his watch, and he's like, "Bro, we got to slow down. We got to slow down." And he kept yelling at me to slow down. And I'm like, "Dude, why do we need to slow down?" And he's like, "'Cause I'm about to blow." And I'm like, if you're about to blow, you're not going to tell me you're about to blow. Right. You're not going to sit here and have a conversation with me. And so that told me, and there was a lot more to the conversation, but that told me right away that we had somebody who didn't really understand, or I hadn't done my job in actually explaining to him that he had made some metabolic improvements, meaning he had become more efficient, and his ability to be at a higher heart rate closer to his popping point was the place for him to be able to feel when he was going to pop, not when he was going to pop. And the irony in this is that you're shifting metabolically daily throughout the day. And so your heart rate is never going to be in one place where you're going to pop. And it's never going to be ideal. You're going to fluctuate. And so you have to be able to feel those places where, hey, if I worked out 3 days really hard in a row, 2-a-days, and then I went for a fourth and decided to, and this is just hypothetical, and then I went for a fourth to go throw down a time trial based on I should just be at this specific heart rate, yet I'm only getting to 10 beats below that, and I feel like I'm falling apart, and I'm not, I'm just under the wattage I should be holding or the speed I should be holding. That's a good sign that the heart rate variable doesn't apply now, right? And I'm actually cooked. And so I'm not paying attention to a lot of the things that are going on to myself physiologically. And we've been, unfortunately, as a species, we've been using technology to guide us to what we naturally are capable of understanding ourselves. And because we've moved ourselves away from nature so far, we've removed ourselves so much from it, we no longer hold on to the ability to understand things that our dogs still understand, that animals still understand and can do. And so we look at these things in amazement versus actually going, "Oh, I'm actually capable of understanding that." Like, I can be alert when I hear something going on versus, all the noise that's going on around me, and I'm not, aware of things, or, walking into a room and knowing somebody's energy's off, and not only seeing that, but feeling that, something like a shark can feel. A shark senses prey when it behaves in a specific way. It's giving off electromagnetic energy. Well, we are hardwired in the same basic way as a shark or even a lion or even a dog. We're not lions, dogs, and sharks, but we are hardwired like that, and we've really removed ourselves from understanding that stuff.
Yeah, I've tried just about every wearable out there, and I have yet to find one that proves super useful or applicable. Well, the one I'm experimenting with right now is called Whoop. I'm sure that you're familiar with that one, but even then, I've never had any luck with heart rate training because, like you said, because I'm not a huge endurance athlete, so like maybe I'm not ultimately conditioned for that. But I mean, if I go on a 40-minute run, it tells me that I was at like 95% of my max heart rate the whole time, which shouldn't really be the case. It should be a little bit lower than that. But I'm like, I think that your calculations off or something, because I feel fine. Like I'm going at a moderate pace, like I feel fine. And then back with the Whoop, I've enjoyed looking at it, but at the same time, I woke up the other day and it was like, because it gives you a recovery score, how much you are recovered based off of your sleep, resting heart rate, and heart rate variability. And it was like, you're not that recovered. And I was like, well, I feel fine. And then I went and did some intervals and stuff. It was a testing day, and I hit PRs in all 3 of my interval training that I'd been training for the last month. And I'm like, the quote unquote technology is telling me to take today off, but I was feeling like I was fine. And so I went and did the interval work and PR'd anyway. So kind of like knowing how I use it, is that a safer way to use it, like, or a smarter way to use it, like letting it read you but not make decisions for you?
Yes and no. So we didn't write this book to tell technology companies they're wrong. Right. We actually wrote this book to help them out. But a lot of them, unfortunately, are going to go in the exact same, and this will go back to the 2 books I recommended again, Behavior. A lot of them are going to go in the direction to create a dependency out of you.
Right.
And that's where the problem is when you get caught in that sheep loop. And I would suggest for people to actually follow what the technology is saying for a number of weeks to get a baseline understanding of what's going on. Then I would decide to step outside of that and see how you feel and start to play with that for a few weeks. And this is how science actually really works. And this is how you and your experience actually works and how you figure things out. This is also how intelligence is created. And understanding that there is no one way to do anything. And you could follow the Whoop app and the Whoop technology and probably have great success with your life, right? The irony in this is, like, I had one of the original Whoop things, and I have many. I had the Aura with the ring, and I've had many products. I've spent thousands upon thousands of dollars, and I've found that it all has some relevance. But if you can't learn from that, it has no relevance.
Yeah, like something I do find interesting, you're talking about in the book kind of being, and you just mentioned when we were discussing, kind of being more, aware, in tune with your body, being able to feel, just being aware of that. Do you think that technology will help guide people into, like what you're saying, maybe they don't actually know, maybe they're just so out of tune, technology can help them kind of get in tune and then try and remove the technology from there? Would that be
that's the problem, is most people think that technology is going to solve their problems, and it's not. And this is where the information is coming out right now, the data on our little step trackers and calorie trackers that everybody's wearing. I'm not going to name products. They don't work.
Yeah.
They don't work. People are not changing. The irony is the only people that it's working for are the neurotic people who want to move and take care of their lives anyway. Right?
Right.
So it comes down to, how do we want to learn from this stuff? And that's where I think the fun is learning and playing and understanding and seeing what it says and not being so glued to it. I mean, I can't tell you how many people I know who I've talked to who have used things like the Whoop app, where you sleep and it measures your sleep cycles and all that stuff. And it's like, dude, like, I get more stressed out trying to get to bed and trying to sleep because of this app or because of what this thing's trying to tell me than I actually, and ironically, those were the types of things that I was picking up on. And now I sleep better. I don't use any technology. I don't have alarms. I'm like, I got back to where I think that I function best, and I feel that I function best. And the funny thing is that we've used all this technology with athletes, and we spent enough time with the technology and with our own algorithms and building things. And coming back to what you were talking about is my mood when it tells me I am ready to go and I feel like I am ready to go, there is nothing that's going to beat that.
Right.
And that is nature, because nobody's going to tell a lion that even though it's starving to death and it needs to kill something, but if it's not really ready physiologically to go kill something, to not move, that the lion's not going to move. It's almost, it really is dumbing us down to a large degree versus saying, hey, here's how we want you to use this and understand it and connect the dots on how you're feeling and how your mood changes with this and where we may be going wrong so that we can collect data and do that. And that's kind of one of the projects I can't really talk about right now, but that's kind of the goal of this next project that we're doing, is to really get people connected back to how to alter that state and put themselves back into a state of being conscious of what's going on so that they can actually understand more of what's happening.
And I would say that though the 10,000 step counters, yeah, they give you like most people maybe a 3-week. I think you mentioned this in the book, like a 3-week shot of motivation, and then it all goes downhill from there. So if someone does want to use a wearable, would your advice be just? I'm kind of piecing this together from everything you just said. Is just kind of have a plan going in, because you're not saying, like you said, you're not saying you're completely anti. I hate all wearable companies. Are you saying have a plan going in, or would you say like, hey, try to do things without it?
Oh, no, I would say, look, I think there's a place for technology. Have a plan. Have a plan for learning something. Don't have a plan for like here, for instance. Getting a specific amount of calories each day is not a plan and not learning anything.
Right.
That's not learning.
Yeah.
Okay. Having an understanding of what happens to your life and what you're becoming and what you're doing and how it's applying to your daily life, that's learning.
Yeah.
Okay. So if I'm going for the 10,000 steps, what am I doing with my life, and what am I picking up along the way that's adding to my life or allowing me to understand what 10,000 steps means? And is it the 10,000 steps, or is 10,000 steps a byproduct of me wanting to change?
And I think this all ties back to kind of where we started the conversation at the beginning of kind of having that why and that bigger picture of everything, for everything you're doing, ultimately making sure it all has a purpose and that you're learning at every step of the way. I think that's
yes. Yeah. And to be honest, I mean, it's another morbid thought, but unfortunately I think we're at a place with the amount, the amount of people that we have on this planet at this point, to where there aren't enough who are going to care enough about this to make the changes, to where there are enough of people that actually do care about it, that will start to make the changes and learn. And these are the people who are going to be more connected to what's going on with nature and what's going on naturally, and how to play and how to be more a part of life versus being disconnected from life. And unfortunately, we pick up the ramifications for those people. And it's no different than what's going on today with obesity and disease. And, we've made it possible for anybody to get a handicap sign. There's more handicap parking spots. There's more people. Like I've watched this with travel, like the amount of people that get on a plane first at this point versus because they're not capable of getting in line with everybody else has grown tenfold from when I first started flying.
Right.
The amount of people that don't fit in seats that aren't required to buy an extra seat. So we pick up the insurance costs, right? Which there's another thing. It's like we look at this whole Obamacare and all this stuff, and it's like, sure, I understand like some of our problems with that, but how come we're not requiring people to take more responsibility for themselves and how they behave? And like, look at the negotiations like the insurance companies cannot have with our medical system. Why is our medical system charging so much money for people who actually take care of themselves? Like we're being fit into these same categories and these same things, and it's pretty sad, man.
And going down that path, I asked the same question to Kelly Starrett the other day, is because you've been putting out a lot of information for. I mean, how long has it been since you first started
CrossFit Endurance? I think that's like that's a decade ago.
Okay, yeah, and so at least 10 years of and you've been on the road doing seminars, you've written books, publishing great information, and so you just have like this huge wealth of knowledge and a lot of experience. And so I like to ask, do you feel like we, as in I'm also a person who's putting out information, writing books, so on and so forth, do you feel like in your experience from what you're seeing that we're making a dent?
Yes and no. That's where it comes back to the population problem.
So you think that it's just the problem is exceeding or rapidly growing too fast?
We've created a world of convenience with technology that allows everybody to survive. Nature does not provide that. Nature is ruthless. Nature is patient. Nature is kind. Nature is destructive. And nature is evolving right now. And it like you can look at things like this. I don't mean to bring up an STD, but it's like you look at gonorrhea right now. Gonorrhea has learned to develop to alter itself based on antibiotics, and it's antibiotic resistance right now. It's antibiotic resistant right now.
Wow.
Nature will win.
Yeah.
It just may not be in our lifetime. And guess what? Your kids, our kids, are going to have to deal with the bullshit that we've set up and played. And I'm as much a part of this process as anybody. But it's like we look at like our social security system. That's still in play. And yet we're all trying to we're all going to suffer for that. You and I won't collect social security. Retirement's not a real thing for us, but I don't think retirement's a real thing anyway. I think that's bogus. Like for anybody to have to retire means they aren't a part of life. And yet when you see things, and this will come back right to the health aspect, look at blue zones, man. These aren't retired people.
Right.
People participating in life and moving around. My mom just left, which is also why I was kind of a little bit late. And I'm like, look, Mom, you have to move more. If there's anything I can tell you, it's move more. Have fun. Move. And you don't need to go lift weights if you don't want to, but damn, that'll help. You don't go get on a bike and do some high level aerobic work, but damn, that'll help. But I'll tell you what, it's like you look at farmers. These are the people that are the longest living that we see. And like we're talking in the blue zones, this is what they're doing. They're an active part of their own cultures in farming and gardening, where they're participating in life in their daily life every day. They're not retiring and sitting on couches and in front of TVs and in screens and doing these things. They're not out playing.
And so going back to the original question, you think just how much of a dent do you think we are making given the problem?
I just don't think. I think there's too many people who don't want to participate in the tribe. And people that legitimately just want a free ride, and they look at the Kardashians and they say, "Damn, I want that." Yeah. I like, and I don't have anything against the Kardashians at all. Like, amazing. You did something, but unfortunately, like, people think that is a way of life, and it's not.
Yeah, that's coming for them in like 10 years. If they just save their money, they'll be.
But if you think power, money, and fame are life,
Yeah.
go to what Jim Carrey said. I wish that every single human being gets to experience this: fame, money, and popularity, so that they understand it is not life.
Yeah. And actually, I've seen a lot of Jim Carrey stuff recently, and he's really come around. But that's a different subject. What I wanted to talk to you about, ask you a very particular question. We call this the book question. And so say there's a nationwide curriculum implemented in the U.S., and the president calls you up and he says you're responsible for one chapter of the book. So every single child in America, they have to read your chapter, and they have to be tested on it before they're ever allowed to graduate high school and do anything else, really. So what would your chapter be about if you could influence the younger generation with that?
Sharing.
And sharing what in particular?
Sharing what you learn. There are two basic things on the most fundamental level, cellularly, that we do: reproduction and sharing information. And until we are immortal, we will always have sharing.
Do you think that, just moving that into today's world, do you think that amplifying your sharing through social media channels, YouTube, all that kind of stuff?
I think that's what social media is for. I think that's what the internet's for, is for sharing information, for educating people. I think our educational systems are, I'd say they're largely a sham. That doesn't mean that anybody participating or that has a job in the educational system is a sham. I know there are great teachers out there, great people who are sharing information. Unfortunately, they are businesses. And when you make something a business, you now have a problem, because now it's about a bottom line, and you have people that are involved for a bottom line. And so you have to create tracing paper. And so we've made it so that we start kids at about the age of, 5 or 6, and they start on this tracing paper thing until they're at least 18. If not, if they decide higher education, that could potentially be another 10 years for some, 4 for most, right? To where the tracing paper is continued, and then go out into the world where there is no tracing paper.
Yeah. And it takes so long to undo that too. Like,
yes. And that's that, but I think that's the importance of somebody like, I feel like I've led a great life, and although I have many troubles just like everybody else, and, there's relationships with people and your family, and that can be difficult at times as well. We all have these issues, but the fact is I've been rebellious since day one, because I never enjoyed anybody telling me how it was going to be done and how to do it, right? Like, how to do it was, this is how you're going to do it. This is what it is. And I was like, no, that is not how I'm going to do it. I don't want to follow you, and this was at the age of 4 or 5, right? And it never stopped. And that doesn't mean I can't listen and I can't observe, because I've learned along the way how to listen and how to take in information, and then extrapolate the information that suits me, or that inspires me or intrigues me, and then apply that information and then share what it is I've learned. And that's, I think, what the process is. And unfortunately, that process doesn't really begin for most people until college, right? And that's where college starts to separate itself from the tracing paper a little bit, even though most degrees are tracing paper. I mean, you go get an exercise science degree right now in most colleges, and it'll be, ancient text that you're looking at for the most part, and answering questions too that is irrelevant.
Yeah, it doesn't help. What I found is that degree doesn't help in any real scenario of developing a coach or programming for athletes, or other than some baseline understanding of the physiological system, And
that is where the tracing paper has massive importance, is to get that fundamental understanding of the physiology and how things actually operate, or let me take a step back, how we know right now how it works.
Right.
Because That is all we know. And we don't know anything.
Yeah, and there's even and I'm sure this comes up in your work. I've only read bits and pieces of it. The connection between the immune system and the brain. They used to think that it was like not connected, right? They're like, there's this blood-brain barrier, it doesn't really work, and they're like, well, actually, new research is finding that the immune system does connect to the brain in certain ways. And I was reading somewhere else that breathing helps with that. And I don't want to sound too misinformed because I don't have any of the research pulled up in front of me. But yeah, I think it's constantly changing. I feel like as humans, we can always be comfortable in the fact that we don't know. Let's say we don't know it all. We know something. We've studied. We've got some science, but we still don't. We have so much to learn about the human body.
I think And you know what? This is why I wrote a book with Dr. Andy Galpin.
Yeah,
is like, look, the guy understands muscle cell physiology as well as any other human being on this planet. And he's like, we don't know anything.
Right.
Like, when I hear somebody talking about type 1 and type 2 fibers, I already know they don't know anything. Like, I already know that they're behind everything that's going on right now. And we don't know enough to know, he got a PhD in a very small area, right? But then it's transcended into all this stuff that he's learned. And so he's the first guy to go, dude, we don't know anything. And these are the people who I work with, and there's a lot of scientists out there that still are doing that, and that are in that area. But unfortunately, a lot of other scientists have jumped ship for funding, and I get it to some degree. They need to pay the bills, and it's like, you only can pay the bills if you're getting funded. And if Big Pharma is paying the bills, baby, you better make some science work for the company that's paying the bills,
right?
And it just is what it is, dude. And this is the world we live in. And so we're now at a point with science to where you can extrapolate studies on, let's just use this veganism thing, on being vegan and its health benefits. Yet, if you've got somebody who's got a paper on eating like paleo and it's saying the same stuff, or ketogenic diets for that matter. So much research is being done on ketogenic diets right now. In showing in favor, because we missed the boat on a lot of stuff. Does that mean veganism's wrong? Absolutely not. Like, that you could still go this way and find massive health benefits for most people. But I also know a lot of people who have fallen apart in that world and are now going a different direction. And who's to say one's right or one's wrong? It's not that, and that's the problem with science, is that it's like, oh no, I'm right. And it's like, there is no right, man. We're just learning. And it's all what we understand right now.
And I think that's so true. And there's a million other things I would love to talk to you about in this book. From one of the things I found really fascinating was the research you guys pulled up in longevity, as far as the predicting factors being VO2 max, grip strength, leg strength, all that stuff. I found that really, really fascinating. Do you, and that'll probably be the last question I ask. I'll say to everyone out there, go pick up this book, Unplugged. You can get it Amazon, everywhere, right? Pretty much everywhere.
Yes. Yeah. Amazon's easiest, know. And I mean, even coming back to the nutrition thing, like, look at this book, right? Take the book and what we're talking about. I don't know too many people who've experimented with enough different nutrition to actually comment on all different nutrition. Right. Like, it is what it is, man. Rob Wolf was a vegetarian. Rob Wolf can comment on being a vegetarian and being, a meat eater and being, somebody who's right. He's got basic knowledge of this stuff. He's got an understanding. Become that person. Go spend time with these things. Go spend time fasting. Go spend time in a ketogenic diet. Go spend time in a vegan diet. Learn from it. What did you learn from it? Don't turn it into dogma. Yeah, that's where things really break down, because I'm not attached. Like, I have my current beliefs and everything, but I'm not attached to any single one of them. If something comes out like where every single person who follows the paleo diet starts dying, okay, maybe we tweak it a little bit. I'm not attached to anything, and a lot of people want to do the "I told you so" or point fingers and have their laugh, but like, who cares? Let's just learn, grow, and evolve, right? And get the best practice for ourselves. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Learning with yourself.
All right, man. Well, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I want to get to the quick fire questions of the show. Are you ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, what's the hardest workout you've ever done?
This workout called the Newport Crippler.
What do you do in that one?
It was 30 back squats at 225 for time, and then a 1 mile time trial run.
That sounds fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
The legs are smoked before you hit that mile. That was.
Yeah. It was disaster pants, man. Like you're waddling, like you kind of look like a rhinoceros heading out the door.
All right, in your opinion, what's the best activity for building mental toughness?
Recognition of your own behavior.
All right. If you could only have one piece of equipment to train with for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Myself.
Perfect. All right, man. The last question. What is your best advice you have for becoming a better human? It's 100% open-ended.
I'm going to defer to actually having some sort of a breath practice. That doesn't mean you need to get into full lotus, externally rotate the hands, and
right.
Find your yogi, spirit. I think that means being conscious of your breathing and understanding your breathing and understanding how well you're adapting and oxygen and just being aware and slowing your breathing down. I think that opens the doors. That's opened more doors for me to myself than anything. Just being more conscious of self.
And I think what you mentioned there at the beginning is a huge point I like to bring up too, is because things like having a breath practice or meditation or anything like that, the reason most people feel uncomfortable with them is because they have some sort of preconceived notion or stigma on what that is or what it relates to, whether that's a religious belief or something like that. If people just know that, hey, this can just be 100% physiological at your start, like getting your body and your breath right. If you want to take it somewhere else after that, that's up to you. But I think that's great advice, man. Getting more connected, and I love it.
Yeah.
All right, Brian. Been a blast having you on. So where can people find out more about your work? Where can you point them? What do you want them to check out?
Pay attention to my Instagram, at I am scared. And then Twitter, I'm at Brian Mackenzie. Facebook, you can find me, Brian Mackenzie. Powerspeedendurance.com, at Powerspeedendurance, social media handles. There will be a lot of stuff coming out in the next few months that'll be really, really important. And cool.
All right, man. I'll link to all that stuff in the show notes. Until next time, Brian, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks, Jared.
Your best. Losers always whine about their best.